We like to avoid that. So again, your textbook solder joint is going to be two wires that have enough of a physical contact to more or less hold together. And we'll take that and we'll show the other side and show that it has enough capture on it so that you could do all kinds of stuff with it and it's not going to fall off. Okay, that's to start with. Now, what's missing is the electrical bond, and that's what soldering mostly is the electrical bond. So we'll take this somewhat beat piece of equipment and we'll use that to hold it. Oh, how about if we turn on the soldering iron? Okay, this one here is one you can get for about 30, 40 bucks. There are better ones on the market, but it suits my needs. What's good about it is that for one thing, before this gets hot, might be too late for that. These tips are replaceable. There's a whole line of tips you can get that fit many different brands. And this, oh, see there, there's the, okay, these tips you can buy many of for not a whole lot of money through Amazon or your favorite source. And that's good because the tips do wear. They wear due to oxidation and high tin solder, you know, stuff like that. Yes, yeah, it does. And so I recommend you get one that works that way. The other thing is this is running on 24 volts on the inside. I mean, it's plugged into the wall, yeah, but I mean, as far as the actual heat done, this is a perfectly safe thing. So if you drop it in, who does soldering in the kitchen? I'm going to drop this in the sink or something, but basically, if you, like an idiot that I am, I cut this by mistake because it looks like RG8 mini foam. You're not going to get hurt. Okay, so now, this is not for the people who know what they're doing. It's for the people who necessarily aren't sure what they're doing or haven't done it yet. The solder you get for doing copper pipe, anybody do that? That's how I learned to solder, was on copper pipe when I was like, you know, okay. Oh, you can't see this, but this is actually a tube. The stuff you would buy for plumbing is not like that. It's just a long shaft that's bent around a thing. This is actually a tube. And in the center of this tube is a bit of what they call flux, or basically it may do many things, but the main thing it does is isolates the atmosphere from the joint that you're in the process of making so that the two metals don't oxidize in real time while the metals are still hot. If you didn't have that, you'd be really hard pressed to get the joint to melt and mix. Now, in the hardware store, you can buy paste flux, make sure it's not acid. And when you buy solder, make sure it's what they call rosin core, not acid core, because acid, well, that would promote the same oxidation you're trying to prevent. Plus, in plumbing, they want the acid to actually etch a little bit, put tiny holes in the material. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to join things together in a clean environment and not use acid to do it. But I have this for a reason that I'll show you a little later on. But if you ever wanted to, you could stick the end of your solder in there and get a little bit extra flux on there to make it flow nice and neat. Now, the idea, I can get this hot and make it melt all day long and be happy as a clam in the sand, but that's not going to help anybody, okay? The idea, I can melt this and have it drip on there, and that's not going to do anything, okay? Okay, that just flakes right off. The idea is the material has to be hot enough to melt the solder. If the material is, and I mean both pieces, not one, if both materials are not hot enough to make this melt, it's not going to adhere properly. You get what's called a cold solder joint. It might look okay at a distance, 20 yards away. But what's going to happen is you're going to be out there in the rain, and this is going to become a naughty connection. You're going to think something else is wrong because I just soldered that. And it couldn't possibly be the problem. When in fact, you have a cold solder joint because the materials weren't hot enough to make a good connection. Okay, again, we have the physical about taken care of. Yeah, I could squeeze that until it doesn't move, but basically I'm not asking this to be the nut and the bolt. This is the electrical connection. So I'm going to heat this up. I am going to put a little bit on this tip just to make it conduct heat a little better than it would otherwise. Okay, and I'll put this right where the two wires meet. And I'm going to put this on the other side of one of these metal pieces, because if it's hot enough over here to melt, then chances are the rest of it's hot enough as well. And you're going to let the solder will attract towards heat. I don't know what principle it is, but it wicks towards the heat. If I put this over here on the opposite side of the work from the iron, it's going to melt where I'm touching and also flow towards the iron. And 1, 2. And what I'm doing there is I'm giving the rosin, the flux, a second or two to burn off by holding it there just a little bit longer than I needed to at first. Not real long, maybe a second or two. I'm going to look at this and make sure that everything around there is surrounded by solder. This is a little light in there, but it's not the end of the world. It's mostly an okay connection. If I really wanted to do this proper and really get points, I'd come back here. Oh, see, I'm getting away from the clean, where I got the lacquer off my magnet wires, what it is. I'm not on bare solder. I'm in bare copper. That's what it is. Okay, so I'll move this back where it was. See, now it's got slobber on both sides, too much coffee. Okay, so now you've got solder in every direction. Let it cool off. Now I've got solder in every direction all the way around, and it's not going to break. So that's mostly, no matter what else we do, all the way up to a coax connector, those are the principles we're following, is to get the solder to flow between all the parts that we need to have under a good electrical connection. So there's that. Let's see, what are the practical applications? I'll give you a couple. Let's see, I do some portable work, and I use a couple different antennas out there, but one's an ED-fed wire. And my hookups are almost invariably a twist on post, a lot like your power supplies have, those banana plug type doodads. Well, here is a connector, which one usually crimps. And you could do that. You could crimp it on this wire and you'd be fine. But because I'm a bit retentive, I tend to take this and solder it. Now, this is more example of how to solder than whether or not you need to do this to your antennas or your power wires. So I'm just showing it to you. Now, I'd be lazy if I didn't mention that there are other things you should do if you're going to do something like this, where you want something to count, you want something to last. Where if you want to treat it as your personal version of critical infrastructure, where you pretend or not pretend that if something fails, somebody gets hurt or worse. So I'm going to put a little bit of strain relief on here. This is heat shrink tubing. When you heat it up, it gets little. If you've never used it, you've certainly seen it. It bulges if you get too hot. Sorry about that. So that's its job. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to prep my work by putting a length of tubing on that's big enough on here that it'll shrink and seize and kind of grip this. And this is too big for the wire, so I'm going to put another piece on the wire itself that'll have the effect of fattening the wire when I do that. And then when I add them together, they'll make a nice sort of a strain relief, the same as this plug has, or the same as the handle has. I'm building a bit of strain relief into it. It only works if you put this on first. Ask me how I know. Okay. So I'm going to put this on there. I could squeeze it first. Don't have to. But I will, because again, there's my physical connection, okay? I could just solder it on, which I've done many times, but if I want to be a good soldering person, I'll make a physical connection first. and then the electrical connection. And I'm going to call that good enough because it's good enough. All right, so now we're going to put this on here. Now this is going to take away some of the heat, so I'm going to grip it as lightly as possible, as far away from the work as possible. If you think, if you get some extra material around there, it doesn't hurt a thing. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to pay attention to my taste, because that's what I like to do. Put a little bit of, you don't have to do this. I just like the way it flows when I've got more goop on there than it came with. You don't have to do that. So now, oh, here you go, proper iron care. When you get your iron brand new, it's going to be bare iron or copper, whatever, and you're going to tin it. And by that, I mean, you're going to take some solder and coat the whole thing all around it. And then take a cleaning pad and kind of brush all that right off again. You do that a time or two, and then take a damp sponge and wipe it and get all the excess leavings off of it. And by doing that, you've got a molecule thickness or so of lead and tin around there, and it heats up nice and evenly across the entire thing. So anyway, now I did it just now because I'm about to use it, and sitting here the last 5 minutes while I sit here and blather on, is this got a coating on it of some of the material. Well, it's very hot and it's oxidized just sitting there because it's very hot. So I just took care of that and got that off of here. So here again, where I want the solder, I don't want the solder here. I want the solder to exist underneath all of this where the bare wire is. I may be applying it here, but I want it to go there. So again, I'm going to put just a bit on there, heat back there, and wait until where my solder is hot enough to melt and draw towards the heat. Okay. Yep. Okay. I have a different definition of pain than some people. But don't try that at home. Anyway, now we're going to take our heat shrink tubing, take a little piece. I'm letting this cool down because if I try to put this on too soon, what's it going to do? Yeah, it'll shrink and it won't work. All right, so I'm going to take this and kind of put it up close to here. And heat this up. Pretty. Okay, then we'll take the great big piece and worry that on up there, and we'll do that again. Here, we'll do it the other way. We'll use the I'm in a hurry method. Oh, thanks a lot. Okay, because we're in a firehouse. Yeah, really, what an embarrassing that would be. Okay, so we take this, I'm gonna hold it at quite some distance, but I'm gonna feather it on there until it starts to go out. The creme brulee torch, or whatever you want to call it. And that's gonna shrink that up to hopefully something near the other size. It's probably an in-between size, but I don't have it with me. So now what you've got, when that finally cools off, you've got something that we can trim down. And what you really don't see, what you can't necessarily appreciate that on camera or across the room. Come on, get off here. I'm cutting off excess heat shrink. And what you may or may not be able to tell is that by pulling it up that far, you've got a shoulder here that kind of dips over top of the crimp area to keep it from sliding off with use. I'll heat it up with the iron again because I was being so timid with the torch. could see Jerry Horn, the fireman, just wanting to stomp it out. So I could do not to. But here we go. So there's a perfectly good end you could crimp on somewhere, and there's just a little bit of extra support for the wire itself. It's not just the soldering, it's the whole job. The holistic approach to antenna connectors or something. But that's going to be there until somebody trips on it, the cat bites through it, or whatever. It's there for the count. That's that. What's another application? Anybody use Anderson power tools on their equipment? Yeah. Well, I'm too cheap to buy pliers, and I like to solder. So the other way, the other application of such things, and this is somewhere where it matters, because if you get extra solder on the contact fingers, they're not going to work so well together. So here we're going to take this here. And I tend to buy, what's the difference between the 15 amp and the 30 amp? I know, who else knows? The size of the collar that you put the wire into. That's the difference.
That's the difference for different size wires.
Yeah, the size of the part where the wire goes. That's the difference between the 15 amp and the 30 amp for these. You can buy whichever. I get the 30 so I can use fat wire when I want to, and use skinny wire when I don't need it. If I use skinny wire, I mean, that'll work right there, but it'll work better if I take this 18 gauge and double it over and put that in there. Now, I used to go and take it like this and heat it up and push solder in there, but it made too much of a mess in there. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's a good idea. Like that idea.
Could you repeat the idea?
So yeah, I'm going to at least tin this a little bit. I'm probably doing something like what he talked about, except that I'm not going to crimp it. And maybe that's a bad practice. And you know, I get it. We have methods, and what I'm going to do is kind of half fill this. And while it's still warm, I'm going to add that to the mix. Just push it down in there. And notice how I wiped it off like that? That's not just a artistic, you know, little move there, like a little, like how you light someone's dessert. It's actually to get this clean. You don't want that to have any more bulk than it was made with, because it might not fit where it's going to go. So that's that. You know, that's there for the count, and then you just put your deal on there, and that's one way to do it. I'm now crimping. It's great. I just like the integrity of a solder connection. And here's where it really matters how you do these things. How hot an iron do you need? Well, you need it to be hot enough to get the surface area warm enough to melt the solder. But you don't want it so hot that it's going to burn all the stuff connected to the wire or the wire itself. Like, having worked with Radio Shack for many years, I used to joke about how Radio Shack has this feature where it's self-stripping wire. Because you apply heat to the wire, and all the insulation sucks back up another 3 or 4 inches. And that's actually not a benefit, it's a terrible thing. But you had to watch the heat. When doing these things, you want the hottest iron you can get, because what's going to happen is you've got this coaxial cable. Okay. Whoops. Okay. It's got this nice soft core in there. And the last thing you want is the inside core to melt before you get the soldering job done. Because as we all know as hams, the impedance of the coax is governed by the size of the center conductor and the distance to the outer shield in proportion to that thickness. And we want to maintain that ratio. Okay, we want to maintain whatever that is. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the business end, the point where the solder is going to go, can melt and apply the solder before it melts the living heck out of the center conductor. That's the trick. So the hottest you can get, like a soldering gun, is not a bad idea. I use the torch to do this because, first of all, you can do it outside in January. Okay, so you winter field day people, you come up and you crimp the cable in the door, pulling it out of the car. And of course we have spare ends, don't we? Don't we? We have spare ends with us, don't we? Okay. Now, here again, it pays to put things on in the correct order, so you just have to do the job once. Okay, here is a connector that'll work with your RG8 cable or LMR 400, same stuff, basically, roughly ½ inch. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to put that thing on there, and darn if that high impedance air gap that screws up antenna match. It's really annoying. The bad words come out and all that. So whatever you do, put it on first. Don't answer the phone. Don't collect $200. You know, don't open another beverage. Just right away, please, and just put that on right to start with. Now this needs a reducer. I mean, I would hate to admit, cough, cough, that I've ever, cough, cough, took the braid and pigtailed it and pushed it through one hole and put the center through the middle and made up a jumper that actually worked an antenna. Who would do that? No, in the real world, we're going to use a jumper, we're going to use a reducer here that's going to put the braid where it needs to be inside the hole so it looks more or less like this. Now notice here that some of these, like this here, no, this here, you can see the inside of an adapter in there, but no braid or solder. That's just how it sometimes works. There's one with braid that I didn't bother to finish soldering. I've seen people in the commercial world only do one hole, and I'm sure that's electrically okay. I don't, because there's not as much stress, there's not as much strain relief. The proper thing is to do all of them, but at least if you get 2 of them, you've got good tensile strength and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we have to cut this in such a way that the center conductor, here's your diagram, so the center conductor is long enough to come out to the nose, and the braid we're going to cut down to almost the end and fold it over here. So what we'll do is take this very dangerous object. Okay, we're gonna okay, I'm gonna come up about half that far and go all the way through the braid to the center without needing the ER. Well, I joke, but when I was 20 years old, I thought I knew how to use a grinding wheel and tore this nail off down to the bone. So yeah, familiarity breeds complacency. Okay, so now we're gonna and I'm just gonna score this 5-4. Okay, I'm just gonna irritate it, and then I'll irritate it a little more deeply that way and peel off the outsides. Now what you're seeing there is a little bit of corrosion because it's old, but it should be okay. Now here's a case where I will use paste flux quite deliberately. The trick is that this stuff has to be all the way down, tight on here, so that I can put an end on and have it go all the way, you know, in. Now I need more of the center insulation off. I knew that, but couldn't do it at the time without getting rid of the shield. Again, scoring. And now, theoretically, I can put that on. Well,
take 2. Theoretically, I can put that on. Yeah, and I can see braid in the holes. I can see the end. Now, me being me, I'm going to bring this off and make sure there are no stray wires going from the outside braid to in there. Thou shalt not. Ooh, evil, evil. Oh, very bad. All right, now I'm going to take some gooey stuff and I'm going to stick it on there. Okay. Okay, now the variation I'm going to use is where I tin that slightly and then also get it to start holding on to the adapter there. If this were regular RG8 foam, the only difference here would be that the shield would be cut back a bit further than it is. And this looking area here would be just on the outside of that. And it would melt easier. So it's a little more tricky, but you're not losing too much information by not having fat cable here. And the trick here is to just change the color of it. Just get it to take enough to saturate and then flick it off if you need to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to solder this braid to the center just a little bit, get it to adhere. So we'll make our very tremendous heat source. Nope. Down. Okay. Here we go. Now, if I put this right in the flame, it's just going to drip down. That's not going to help anybody. So I need to try to heat this up and try to apply the solder somewhere where the flame isn't. See there how it just falls off? Or just touch it occasionally. Move the fire away and touch it occasionally. And let me figure out when it starts to melt. No, see, now it's starting to melt. Oh, look at that. Isn't that pretty? See how it started to flow into the braid? That's what we're looking for. Now I took the heat off right quick. I used enough heat it would melt and adhere, and then I got away from it. And that was exactly the idea. I'm going to try the other side a little bit. And again, I'm going to stick my solder into the paste and just get a little extra on there. I'm going to heat this up, trial and error with replacing the flame with solder. Ooh, there you go. Okay. Now we can see here the effect of the heat. It started to make some of the vinyl squeeze out. Tell me, is this Radio Shack? I have a spool of it. My shed has lasted many years. Anyway, all right, so there we go. So now we have an electrical connection between the braid and the adapter piece. We're going to screw this on. And maybe. I mean, realistically, there's probably a good enough electrical connection here that you could use it in the shack or in a car and all that, but it's not quite cricket, but you could get away with it. But what you don't have is a good tip connection. So we're going to take this, we're going to heat this up enough to get the outside hot enough to flow solder and the inside just enough that it will flow around. And what I'm going to do is, with good camera work, you're going to see that I can take and apply solder, turn it, and make the solder follow the heat from hole to hole. Now, depending on who you listen to, what your personal experience is, you really don't have to fill all 4 holes, but you can. It's not a bad idea. Worst things to do.
What? Oh, yeah, yeah, that's true. Okay, so first of all, I could just use a soldering iron on this. I mean, that's normally what I do, but here I'm gonna take this and up. Okay. Now we're going to do the outside edge. Okay, so where's one where I have absolutely good solder? This one. Okay. Same thing. I'm going to heat this up. A little on there. Now, what's going to, a little piece of advance, that's going to be my telltale. See, it's starting to melt. Come on, warm up. Put it back under the heat. I'm trying to get that to flow. And I've got the flame where I want it to flow to. Okay. Now it's disappeared. I'm going to shove more in there. I'm going to rotate the heat around. And you can actually see this, the melted solder is already in that hole. I'm just going to add to it. I can hit the hole. There's plenty of solder in there now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this really cool heat sink and put it on there because it doubles it doubles keeping it in place on an antenna, but what it really is a heat sink. There you go. Now this is heated up for whatever reason. So it, well, gee, I just had the torch on there. So what I'm going to do is take that and just use a conventional iron and fill that up. Gravity may have played a role in that. But here again, oh, see how brown that is? See how brown the tip is? Okay. So we're going to take that and wipe it on the slimy sponge and make it look a little prettier, a little. Put a DAP on there to conduct heat. And we're going to let the material do the melting. The material doesn't melt the solder will not stick. It's the way it is. Burn off some of the rosin. And now let's test it. This won't test impedance, but at least I can tell if I've got a direct short. Take my voltmeter and put it on beat. That's inside to outside. Oh, okay. Inside to outside is not shorted. Center to center. Ooh. And outside to outside. And that's that. It worked all right. Now, I did cause a bubble on the end of here. Not a big deal, but if you get too messy with the solder, you want to razor it off, or it may not go into your radio or antenna connection socket. So try to watch that. I mean, I admit I'm doing this in kind of a hurry, but that could happen even to careful people. So even though it's still very, very hot, we have a successful antenna connector put on there. And that's the way that works. So the main takeaways you should get from this are make sure you have a good mechanical connection first. Don't expect the solder to do the work for you, even though solder does have its own strength, such as it is. It's not the way to do it. You need to have something mechanical to keep it in place, with the solder do the electrical part of it. Same here. Same here. As you saw, is mostly put together here too. Ouch. What was that about pain? Anyway, because
even before soldering, you had that fold back of the copper and all that, so it's basically mechanically intact before the solder went on. And that's the main thing about it. Anybody have anything they want to add or?
I got a question.
Suggest for the.
Got a question.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the questions from the room because we can't hear them?
Oh, yeah. Much easier. Yeah, much easier. Much yeah. It's so. Sweet the thrills the drive. Very. Easy 60.
Can't hear anybody from there.
We can't hear anybody.
Down and that way we turn the fan off.
I switched this audio back on.
Okay.
I just came back on.
Okay.
You guys hear now?
Barely.
Who's talking?
We gotta wait for the heat to come down.
Yeah.
Give us a second.
Can't you have it?
This one is. You can help. It's sounds like you know. So there, first thing I do is take this one.
Here, actually, yeah, I did solder it on. I did solder it, so it gave some strength. But first thing you should do is take them and try to beat them up, because what's gonna happen is you end up crushing them with these things here. But they have a magnifying glass usually. Oh, thank you. Yeah, they come with a magnifying glass and on and the two things, and they really do help. Not now. Not now. They did have one, but anymore, I just
Jeff wants to touch you. Stand by, Jeff. Stand by, Jeff. Jeff Sargent.
Can you hear us, Jeff?
I had a question for Ted.
Okay, go ahead.
What's the temperature of your soldering iron?
I was using it at about 400 or so, 375, 400.
Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Oh, Celsius. Yeah, that was like 750.
Okay, thank you.
Now, but I didn't have to have it that hot. There was, well, the end pieces of the fire, it took like far less. And it probably would have been a good idea, but this is still what common required. And I knew that, because that little spectrum wire that Ken and I know too well. I would have turned it down to probably 600 or less.
326.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah.
Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you. So some of us, especially as we get older, start developing shaky hands, and it's a little hard to control everything. Other than the third hand that you were using, is there anything else that you recommend to assist with that?
Yeah, I I mean, without, whatever physiological conditions, I mean, if I have too much coffee, I'm 165 in 3 weeks, it's not getting any easier to do this stuff. What may help is really lighting, because it helps to become more confident with what's going on, and the whole job becomes easy enough, and your muscles don't get strained. Whatever you can do to secure the materials, if you get to a point where you can rest your forearm on a table, it's good. At home, many of us have a desk with a magnifying glass. Rest lighting around. Again, that's not going to keep your body from shaking if your body shakes, but it can at least help you keep your target in sight and give you something to focus on. And I think it helps them come some efficiencies besides just listening. I think it helps the whole thing and the whole policy goes to it, at least in my experience.
Any other questions, Ted? Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's also very important when you're soldering, you have to have proper ventilation because of the fumes from the solder on the iron. So like behind me on my bench, ironically, I'm down at my bench, there's a red fan back there, and I use that when I'm soldering to blow the air away from me, so you don't breathe that in. So it's very, very important that you know.
In my home, at my house, my cabinet's more of a this, and it so happens that there's a roof access hole about the size of a possum there. I took it, cut it out, and put an 8-inch square 12-volt muffin fan I run on 9 volts. And it just takes the room air and then out into the great outdoors, I suppose. But yeah, getting the race lead in here. I don't plan on losing this. Wash your hands, and all that. And that's well taken. Thank you for bringing it up.
So your next lesson, Ted, is you got to show how to desolder. That's an art too.
You know what? I've ruined 2 good radios this year trying to desolder. I'm going to leave that for somebody who can do it successfully. I'm not very good at it. It's risky. The trick is I'm applying so much heat to the circuit board, delaminates the compensation. You know, there's desoldering whip. I could have showed that. There are the little suction things. There's compressed air. There's the machines where you stuff the still, and it sucks solder from the board and through the holes and all that. There's a trick to it. It requires more patience than I have on today's small electronics to show you.
Yeah, and I'm sure some folks here will mention this is that, you know, what you're showing is conventional soldering, which, you know, we all wish it was still like this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of surface mounted devices today we use, right? You know, and there's special soldering techniques to do that. And that could be another lesson we do down the road to show how you use surface mount.
Some of the stuff I try to change the socks on a gear tip. And it's really something you're not going to do on camera. Honestly,
I do the occasional moments, digital mics, to do all my switch.
Really?
Very sharp thoughts, Mark. 3-4 minutes. You want to go much harder. So let interest.
Hey, that's no more questions. We'll go ahead and close this portion of the meeting. Excellent presentation. It has been
thanks, Jerry, for doing the camera.
excellent.